So Catherine specifically flew in from Jakarta yesterday night, and she is leaving Singapore to Jakarta again this night. So thank you so much for coming to Singapore.
Thank you so much for having me. My pleasure.
And obviously, everybody knows GoTo, so I would not go into the detail of that. However, one thing that is sort of like a macro level as an intro. So the general consensus is that during pandemic, we saw a rise in food delivery, we saw a rise in e-commerce.
Yep.
However, ride-hailing had a hard time. And hopefully, we're now in the post-pandemic and we won't go back to that state anymore. So what's happening in your various services?
You're absolutely right? I think we are, as an ecosystem, I will call it lucky, that we have a portfolio of different services, different products that kind of like compensating one for another. I cannot imagine if, let's say, we are only a ride-hailing, for example, during the pandemic. However, having said that, actually the pandemic helped us in quite few different ways, right? Silver lining, I always say it. It definitely speed up a lot of the digital adoption, right? As you know, GoTo has three companies, call it that. In the group, there is a online delivery, the ODS, which is the transport and the food delivery. The second one is e-commerce. The third one is the GoTo Financial. For example, the payment by QR, so on and so forth, the adoption is like through the roof in terms of the education of the market about why people using QR. In the past, there's always been, pre-pandemic I meant, it's always been one of the harder things to tell people, hey, especially if you're Android phone, right, download your QR scanner kind of thing. Now it's become a very natural. So that's one, right, the adoption of that. The cashless society. No one wants to touch the germs on the what do you call that, money, that's the same thing. Food delivery, as you mentioned, and e-commerce, people are staying home at the comfort of their own home. They don't have to go out meeting people, social distancing and stuff. Actually, including for transport as well, even though it got hit the most during the pandemic, we are now about 90% back.
90%?
Yeah, 90% back.
This is in Indonesia or?
Total.
Throughout Southeast Asia.
Throughout Southeast Asia. Pre-pandemic, hopefully continue to go on. It's also for us is a chance for us to reinvent a lot of the how we are seeing things. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And during this conference, two-day conference, we heard a lot about profit making. So it used to be, last year it was all about revenue, you know, how's the revenue growing? But now it's all about cash flow and profit. And obviously, so the profitability has become, you know, a key challenges for any startups and even a big tech company like yourself and your friends in Singapore, the other green G company. So what are the challenges to monetization for GoTo's business right now?
That's a very good question. Actually, just now in the holding room, Akito-san and I were like joking because I said that if you come to Jakarta, visit our Gojek office. Is in this rundown building. It's serious. It's old malls that there's no one want to rent there anymore. We took it over. We took like 3-4 stories, and we were saying like now you are so proud when you say we have the cheapest office.
Yes,
so
we were saying last year people were, you know, very proud of being in the center of the city and living in the most expensive office. But now she gets to brag about how cheap her office is, and that's
right.
Very different situation. But I mean, in a good way.
In a good way, in a good way. I think like you have to be prudent everywhere, all around, right? So to your question, what is the challenges of the monetization, right? So let me start business by business, because as I mentioned, GoTo is multiple kind of like businesses, right? We continue to improve what we call the take rate, which is basically our commission. So we are now north of 20% of the combined transport and food business. At the same time as well, we managed to increase, I believe, close to like 50 bips on the e-commerce as well. So it's definitely, again, right? We see the pandemic as an opportunity because a lot of our merchants, specifically if you talk about e-commerce and food delivery, in the past, they will say like, hey, I don't want to join you. I have my blossoming, doing well offline business, why do I want to do online, right? Online probably 10, 20, 30% of their business. They have a choice that time. So a lot of acceleration, it also happened during the pandemic. So a lot of our business model has shifted as well. Let me give an example. I'm most familiar with food, so I will use that as an example, right? In the past, the big brands, the big merchant, they always say, hey, you are 20% of my business. Why do I want to allocate my marketing money, my promo money to you much, right? Suddenly, throughout the pandemic, they're like, whoa, I have no choice. So we started changing as well the way we are engaging with them and say, hey, give your marketing budget to us. We'll help you manage it, right? Because number one, they are not the most online. They're not super familiar with the online. So you see that as a potential for us to really become their growth partner as well as hedging for them, right? For example, we have now, I believe, one of the largest cloud kitchen cloud kitchen ecosystem in Indonesia. We have 70-something kitchens all over Indonesia. This is blossoming as well throughout the pandemic because the merchants say, hey, I got burned so hard during the pandemic with the mall because the mall kept closed, open, close, open, close, open. Well, our kitchen is a much lower OPEX. It's using much less kind of like employees. They can kind of like curate their menu, so on and so forth. And it's a much better kind of online services. So we see that, right? So if you see our numbers in our earning report, our take rate continues to grow quarter on quarter. At the same time as well, we see this as a shift as well, how we are conducting our monetization scheme with our
Very interesting.
partner.
You touched on this a little bit, but I think one of the challenges and big opportunity for companies like GoTo is that you have to make sure that GoTo itself becomes profitable, but at the same time, you have to make sure that your partners are successful, because if not, they will go somewhere else. How do you ensure your sort of profitability and growth and make sure that the partners, this could be merchant, this could be drivers, are happy with you?
That is a very, very good question. I always say that we are in the business of a triangle, right? There is a merchant, there is driver, there is a customer. Balancing the three is always going to be the hardest challenge we have. And I always joke, right? Like in any negotiation, the best deal is when everybody walking out mostly happy, a little bit unhappy, right? Because if one party is totally happy, you know that the other side is doesn't get their fair share. So to answer that, right? We have a few rule of thumb, right? Using so e-commerce, and let's start with the merchant side, because e-commerce and food has the merchant in our ecosystem, right? They are the one, I used the word growth partner just now, and we really live by that. What do we mean by that, right? Basically what we are telling them is, hey, what is your budget, for example, right? What do you get if usually you are doing this in the other channel? So our task there is basically building the tools and so on and so forth to make sure the ROI is better. In terms of like how we are deploying it, for example, whether we are using it to do an ads or we are using it to do a promo or something like that, merchants actually care less. What they care about is what is the ROI. So what we do, a lot of it is because to answer your question, how we balance, a lot of it require a lot of product innovation. A lot of it also require data innovation. For example, when our merchant trusting us with their promo budget, we deploy it through our machine learning. So this machine learning is basically reading our consumer behavior. For example, you like merchant ABC, I like merchant XYZ. So when merchant ABC is giving us the budget, I will deploy it to you rather than to me. Because if I don't have affinity to that merchant, when you give me a promo, I have to give more to entice you to convert, right, with the merchant that you don't have affinity to. So that is our kind of model. At the same time, to increase the frequency for someone like you. Similarly as well for our driver, a lot of it is what our driver care at the end of the day is how much I take home, how much money I bring home to my family at the end of the day. So if you look at our driver, and this is true core of what we believe in Gojek, right? Our driver, this is our backbone. It's not just about the income, but also about their expenses. This close to 2 million drivers that we have in our platform, they really rely on us to make their livelihood. And we map out, right, what are the expenses that they care about. For example, fuel, right? For example, the pulsa. Pulsa is your top-up, right? Because phone is their livelihood. Their food, their maintenance for their motorcycle, their installment for the motorcycle loan, for example. So we have what we call program Swadaya. Swadaya, it means self-sustaining or something like that in English. So basically this program giving our driver access for a negotiated deal that we do with a partner. For example, right, we are negotiating on their behalf with telco provider. So they got the best offering for their phone top-up, right, airtime. Similarly, we are working with the financial companies, now with the GTF as well, for their loan, how we can make it. So we really look at it as a holistic, right? It's not about just always increasing their income, which we will, but at the same time also reducing their cost.
Fuel? Do you do anything with the fuel?
We do. Sorry?
Fuel. Because, I mean, you know, with the inflation, the fuel is one of the big costs.
So that's an interesting question, right? I think 2 weeks ago, fuel in Indonesia, the subsidy of the fuel was removed a little bit. So there is an increase of the fuel. So we basically, we have a very, very great support from the government, right? So in this, even so Indonesia has multiple fuel level. So the lowest one is what we call the subsidized, it's Pertalite. It's called Pertalite. So this one is when the government to increase this fuel price, which is the most subsidized one, which is being used by a lot of, if not all of our driver, we are part of that discussion point as well, right? So we are talking with the government saying, hey, our typical driver, this X% of their income goes to fuel. Thus, this kind of fuel price, how it impacts them. So it's a very all-encompassing, I must say, right? We're looking at it, this is really the ecosystem.
Okay, interesting. And, you know, since this is such an important topic, I would keep on asking in a different form.
Yes.
And, you know, I should say it used to be, but the main sort of race between yourself, GoTo, or Gojek, and Grab in Singapore, and all the other, I shouldn't say all the other, one more, Orange, your friends, used to be how fast can you deliver, you know, your food, how efficiently can you take me to Changi Airport and whatnot. But, you know, from an investor perspective, it's now seriously about race to profit, who makes the black ink first. And if I recall correctly, I think GoTo has said on-demand business will break even by Q1 2023?
Yes, that is correct.
And e-commerce by Q4.
Q4.
Q3?
Q4.
Okay. Q4 23. And, you know, if you could go into a bit detail how you would achieve this, especially, you know, what are the sort of competitive advantage of GoTo, and how are you going to do differently from your competitors?
Let me start with the Gojek first, right? The Q1 24. Multiple ways, right? There is no one silver bullet for us to do that. Number one is definitely what I mentioned earlier, how we continue to improve our take rate. So this take rate is a combination of our commission. At the same time, we have what we call the platform fee, which is we are charging this depending. So similarly, we do on targeted way as well. For example, higher AOV, higher basket size charge, longer distance, so on and so forth. So a lot of it is, there's no one size fit all, Akito-san. It's just we have to be understanding, right, which segment, which use case, I should not segment, which use case is less price sensitive, and that is where we are going to do it, right? So that is one on the top line, right? So if you look at our P&L, it's basically from the first one is our revenue, which is our take rate, and then minus the, what do you call that, the driver incentive. I mentioned about that. And then the third one is the promo. As we know, promo is like one of the largest chunk of an expense for anyone.
Well, we loved it as consumers.
As a customer. We just, you know what, this is our own doing, right? We trained the market wrongly. So, from last year to this year alone, we have improved our, we call it RPL, efficiency more than 40–50%, right? While continue to grow our top line. How do we do that? Is similarly, we do a lot of the machine learning on the targeting, the one that I mentioned, right? If we have same amount of money, $100, how do we stretch the $100? Which customer we give, which transaction of the customer we give. For example, we learn first transaction is the worst for you to give promo. Because the first transaction is basically the biggest telltale whether that customer is a quality customer or not. If you give promo on the first transaction, actually it muddy the water, you know? So while our game is to say that, hey, very quickly, in the shortest time possible, we should be able to say, hey, whether that is a good quality customer or not. So the faster you know this, the better it is, right? I'll come back on what do we mean by the profitable, good quality customer. So we realized that, hey, first transaction is the worst for us to do that. The first transaction needs to be what we call organic. This is for you to know whether the customer is a real and quality customer or not. Then the second, third, fourth, you can incentivize to grow their stickiness. Because the second aha moment, if within, I'm making it up now, if within 30 days you do X transaction, that's when you convert as what we call the good customer. Because your retention is better, your frequency is better, wallet size better, so on and so forth. So all this kind of thing that we are learning, we invested a lot in our data, machine learning. This is why we believe how we can be most efficient. Again, similarly, we were joking earlier saying that GoTo has always had the smallest balance sheet compared to our neighbor since the very beginning of the day. I know some of you might be laughing looking at our balance sheet that you call small, but
now you know, now not being used to having a big wallet is a good thing right now, especially right now.
Exactly. So in that sense, is we have to build a muscle all this time to use the least amount of money and go the furthest, right? So that is basically to answer your question, right? So it's from the top, we always do increase ads revenue as well. It's going to be one of the area we're going to continue to grow. Then on the same time is the efficiency of the promo is the key. Is key on that. Yep. Similarly, on the e-commerce side, we will continue to grow our revenue. Our e-commerce has been doing pretty well with the ads revenue. We'll continue to grow that. Similarly as well on the promo efficiency. Great. So that's the three levers that we always look at.
Could you tell us about the targeting, the food delivery bit that we were talking about?
Oh, yes. We were just joking that we never believe as a company on the customer base. What we believe is a use case specific. What do I mean by that? Take me for an example, right? What I mean by we don't believe in the user segment is because if people look at maybe most of us in this room, right? Hey, if we use a social economy background, you will always pack people in this room saying like, hey, you're going to be a higher basket size, so on and so forth. But it's not. But we have to look at it more on the use case. What do I mean by that? Catherine, during lunchtime weekdays, will behave very differently to Catherine on either Friday night or Saturday, right? Because on the weekdays lunch, I will say that, hey, I just want to buy something fast, something affordable, because I'm just going to eat fast, right? This is in between meeting. I want to kind of like save money there. But on the weekend, it's very different. I want to splurge with my family, with my friends, so on and so forth. That is why one of the thing, as you see, the common thread here is a lot of data work that we are doing, is to do this kind of recommendation, to do this kind of like relevancy, we call it, when we are doing recommendation, to make sure that we read the customer on their occasion, on the specific use case, specific occasion. We believe with this, we can, one, understand the customer better and to increase their frequency, right? Catherine liked bubble tea during 3-4 p.m., right? It's an additional kind of a use case that I can add on that. So this is how we believe when we talk about the segment of one, actually what we say is no, it's a use case. It's a use case specific per user. This is what we have been investing a lot and will continue to invest so we understand our customer and we can deepen our wallet size and to multiply that is because we have transport, we have e-commerce, we have our financial services as well. This is how the data we use across this ecosystem to kind of continue to multiply this.
Very, very interesting. And yeah, I think it's a really interesting approach. And I guess that's all about, the magic is in AI, obviously, and how much customer data you have.
Yes.
And how much customer data you can process, I suppose. And of course, it's a good story for merchants as well, isn't it? Because
absolutely. Now that you mentioned that, for example, we launched last month GoFood in Tokopedia. You will ask me like, hey, Kath, don't you think Tokopedia and Gojek has a lot of overlap? No, not really. We do have overlap, but there's some that is not overlap yet. Rather than, the thing is this, right? We take it for granted that our phone has big memory. Most people, one of their most valuable asset is the memory in their phone. You will see a lot of our customers deleting one app to install another app, right? So sometimes, then this is what changed our mindset after the merger, saying like, hey, why do we always have to quote unquote force the customer to download Gojek? If they are already in Tokopedia, we have to be there where they are already. This is where the cross-pollination happens. So we launched GoFood in Tokopedia to allow that as well. So Tokopedia user who has a larger affinity with Tokopedia can do it easier in the platform that they are more familiar with.
Yeah, great. I mean, elaborating on that question, obviously the Gojek Tokopedia deal was the biggest, tech deal in Southeast Asia, and it's obviously the biggest in Indonesia. And so and that was announced a year? No.
Q2 last year.
Okay.
Yeah,
So it's
so
pretty
slightly over 1 year. Yeah.
And how is the integration going? And as a customer and potentially investors, what more sort of new service can we expect from the integration or with the merger of Gojek and GoTo? And where, I mean, this is a multiple question. I shouldn't be doing this as a journalist, but where would you be investing the most in the future?
That's a very, very good question, right? I can say that we are at the beginning of how we are really leveraging this joint ecosystem, right? But let me answer that question by giving a couple of examples. The GoFood and Tokopedia is one example. Another one, we recently launched what we call GoPay coins. It's basically a GoPay by GoPay. It's a currency that allows us to do cashback across the Tokopedia, which is e-commerce, Gojek, which is transport and food, and allow the cross-pollination. So everyone issue the same GoPay coins that can be used everywhere, right? So in that sense, this is to promote the cross-pollination and thus higher frequency across the different transactions in the platform. That's the second one. The third one is we are also launching recently what we call Gojicil, which is installment. So to Tokopedia users, right? So we whitelisted a few 100,000 users to test it and say, hey, now when you transact in Tokopedia to buy your phone, to buy your TV, to buy your oven or something like that at a certain group of customer, you can enjoy this Gojicil, which is the GoPay product for installment. Similarly as well, right? Hopefully it will increase the Tokopedia transaction because it increases the affordability. At the same time, it's also growing our financial products. I think, again, this is the three very early examples.
Yep.
We have quite a number more in the pipeline.
Great, interesting. The timer is very intimidating, but I'll ask two more questions, and it will be related to some of the questions that you guys shared, that the audience shared with the.
Yeah.
The first one is geographical sort of, I shouldn't say strength, but where would you invest the most geographically? So within our conversation, a lot of things are happening in Indonesia.
That's
However,
correct.
Southeast Asia is very diverse, and of course there are very different competitive landscape within certain countries. So how should we see where GoTo is focused? I mean, obviously you're focused on Indonesia, but what's the balance here?
Yeah.
Would you be sort of focused on Indonesia and then go to other countries, or what's your strategy?
So today we are present in 3 countries, pretty modest. We are in Vietnam, Singapore, and Indonesia. Of course, Indonesia being the stronghold of our whole GoTo ecosystem for a very, very obvious reason, yeah? And we do believe that for us to be a real strong, not strong, but to be the clear market leader of anyone in Southeast Asia, Indonesia, you have to kind of like win it, right? And we do in all products. We are the clear market leader of the market share in transport, in food, in e-commerce, and so on and so forth, right? In payment as well. we really, we truly believe that we cannot spread ourselves too thin at this point. We need to have a clear stronghold in Indonesia, as we do. But yes, as you see, we started already in Vietnam, in Singapore, and more to come.
Okay.
But then again, we are taking it one step at a time with the focus of the profitability.
Of course.
Right? We want to make sure that we can show, we can exhibit that profitability in our market stronghold, and using that positive EBITDA to kind of like maybe one day to expand further. But I think that the focus this day is very, very clear.
Great.
Is to turn it into profitability first.
And the question is about the acquisition in August. It's a crypto, so it may not be related to your sort of domain.
This is very interesting.
But let me just ask, would you want to answer this? So GoTo acquired the crypto firm. And what value proposition do you see in crypto sector?
This is very interesting, especially during the crypto funding winter, right? As you see, we are a long-term. We see things, right? We have our vision, how we see it. The GoTo Financial is the one of the three arms we have. We do believe that it is a holistic play as well. We see an opportunity for us to kind of like complete our ecosystem. I cannot share yet, unfortunately, what is our strategy behind that. In due time, you'll see it. But yeah, as you see, we are very lucky that these three OpCo, we call it, right? The on-demand services, e-commerce, and financial are very complementary.
Yeah.
And this is going to continue to be our differentiating factor.
Yeah.
This is what helped our IPO process as well, because of this unique kind of ecosystem. And we will continue work on to complete our
Great. And this will be it's typing, but unfortunately this will be the last question from me, and then I think our times are up. One last question is that, whether if you want to say this as a funding winter or not. And we were discussing backstage that it's not necessarily a bad thing. You will find greater companies, greater deals, and obviously the last few years back was a bit too hot. And you may, Southeast Asia is a everlasting summer, but this may be the first winter, who knows. But anyhow, what I'm trying to ask is that if you look at the sort of global tech history, a lot of interesting and creative deals happen during these kind of time. The valuation goes down. There's interesting consolidations within the industry. Big company may be acquiring very prominent, but having a difficult time, startups and whatnot. And obviously, GoTo was formed by one of the creative deals or acquisition or merger.
Yes, during the pandemic.
During the pandemic, which was very difficult. We spoke about this too. So how do you see the partnership? I wouldn't say far as acquisition opportunity, but there are lots of startups that are seeking new opportunities with big companies like yours. Or how do you see partnership opportunities with startups and potentially big companies in Southeast Asia?
We are a big believer that we cannot do this alone, right? As if you see that, we probably have done a lot more kind of like corporate finance kind of activities, right? Quite a bit in our 10 years or so kind of like history now as a company. We fully believe that for us to create an ecosystem, we cannot have it all ourselves. We have to partner. We have to kind of, for example, let me just give an example to answer that question is, we have quite a bit actually. So we have for example, we know our merchant needs a lot of help, right? A lot of our merchant, 96% of our merchant are small, medium businesses, micro, small, medium businesses. We need a lot of help. So we always partner with, I think yesterday we introduced them to one of the tech-based, which is very interesting, tech-based fishery, right? So they can do a better kind of a quality fish and so on and so forth, and we connect them. So we also believe one of our role in this ecosystem is being the connector of the startup and player in our ecosystem, right? It doesn't have to be necessarily us, but maybe our driver, maybe our merchant, and maybe our customer kind of thing, right? Same thing as I mentioned, the driver, we connect them with the financial product kind of like provider. Our merchant, the same thing, we connect them with this startup that is doing a blue-collar worker sourcing for them, because we know that it's restaurant business has a lot of a turnaround, which is not easy. So that's how we see we play as well. Doesn't have to be every single one we have to invest in it or be in it, but what we see is what can add value to the players in our ecosystem will be there. So we have these communities among our merchants that we always bring in this kind of startup to introduce themselves. They can pitch it, and then our merchant will contact them. We have now 1 million.
1 million?
1 million food and beverages merchant in our ecosystem. Yeah.
Interesting. So I guess we have a lot of venture capitalists and entrepreneurs in the, or whoever watching, you know, any interesting opportunities, call Catherine, or I mean, maybe
call
not
GoTo.
you, or call GoTo. All right. Well, great. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you
very
so
much.
much, Catherine, and thank you, Joji, and thank you, Deal Street Asia.